Good morning, everyone. I am Vanessa Acaron Toro, Director of the Planning and Engineering Office of the Energy Bureau of the Puerto Rico Public Service Regulatory Board. It is 10:04 in the morning of Friday, January 15, 2021, and we are commencing this pre-filing technical conference in case number NEPR-MI-2019-0005, review of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority's Comprehensive Vegetation Management Plan. We are holding this technical conference remotely as a precaution to avoid the spreading of COVID-19. This morning, we are joined by Associate Commissioners Ángel Rivera de la Cruz.
Morning.
Lilian Mateo Santos.
Good morning.
Ferdinand Ramos Seibert.
Good morning.
And Silvia Huarte Araujo.
Good morning.
Chairman Edison Aviles Delis will be joining later on.
I'm already in.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Additionally, we have with us Jorge Camacho and Roger Schiffman, who are Energy Bureau's consultants. On December 31st, 2020, the Energy Bureau issued a resolution and order in the instant case through which it established several principles to be followed in the development of a draft comprehensive vegetation management plan to be filed before the Energy Bureau. Additionally, the Energy Bureau ordered LUMA and PREPA to attend today's pre-filing technical conference in order for PREPA and LUMA to clarify any questions they may have regarding the filing of the vegetation management plan. This technical conference will be conducted in English and will be recorded in audio and video. Furthermore, it is being streamed live both in English and Spanish via the Energy Bureau's YouTube channel. A copy of the recording of the technical conference will be made part of the administrative file of this case and will be available to all parties at the Energy Bureau's website. We will now establish the instructions to be followed during this pre-filing technical conference. Before answering any question or addressing the Energy Bureau, all participants must identify themselves for the record by stating their full name, position in PREPA or LUMA, or whether they are a PREPA or LUMA consultant. Before addressing the Energy Bureau, please unmute your microphone and state your name. Please keep your microphone on silent mode while not answering questions or addressing the Energy Bureau in order to avoid disturbances due to background noise. Before continuing, I would like to ask PREPA's counsel who is present from PREPA personnel on today's conference.
Good morning, Engineer Canoro. Thank you. Good morning to all commissioners and to all the public streaming this meeting. My name is Katiuska Bolaños. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Diaz & Vasquez, and I'm here this morning representing the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. I would like to go through the list of the officers from PREPA that are representing PREPA here today during this meeting. So here with us is Mr. Jaime Lopez, who is PREPA's Executive Deputy Director in charge of Finance and Administration. He has also been named PREPA's Principal in charge of the transition. It's also here with us this morning, Mr. Fernando Padilla, Deputy Executive Director in charge of Operations. Ms. Attorney Astrid Rodriguez, PREPA's General Counsel, Engineer Alfonso Baretti, Director of Planning and Environmental Protection, Engineer Humberto Campan, and also Engineer Jose Sepulveda, Director of Transmission and Distribution.
Thank you, Attorney Bolaños. Likewise, I would like to ask LUMA's counsel, who is present in this call.
Good morning to the commissioners, to the staff of the Bureau, and to all those connected to this conference. Margarita Mercado Echegaray, representing LUMA Energy as Management Co. and LUMA Energy Serve Co. I'm accompanied by Laura Rosas, also representing LUMA. And from the LUMA representatives present and in this conference is Mario Hurtado, Vice President of Regulatory Matters, Ashley Englund, Director of Regulatory Matters for LUMA, and also joining for other staff who will be taking notes, Spencer Wise, And maybe later, Brianna Wise will also join through the Teams platform for Luma also to follow and take notes. Good morning to all.
Thank you, Attorney Mercado. I would like to ask commissioners if they want to open with any remarks. If not, we would proceed with the agenda. All right, then I would like to ask PREPA's counsel first if you have any questions regarding this filing or any other matters. If not, we would then go ahead with Luma. Ms. Bolaños.
Good morning, Katiuska Bolaños for the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. I don't know if Mr. Lopez has maybe a brief opening remark that he would like to give today. Otherwise, I have not been advised that any of the PREPA representative has any questions at this moment.
Yeah, good morning. This is Jaime Lopez for the record. Again, just wanted to emphasize that we have here today the officials from PREPA that not only are managing the current vegetation management efforts and activities, but also have been working and sharing the corresponding information with Luma representatives for Luma to have such information and produce the required plan. Fernando Padilla is our Deputy Director of Operations, if he would like to make any other initial statement. If not, I'll pass it over back to the Commission and to Luma.
Hi, good morning, Jaime. Good morning, Commissioners, and to the general public. Echoing Mr. Lopez's initial remarks, our team is ready to proceed.
Thank you, PREPA. So, Attorney Mercado, you may begin if you want to make a brief presentation, or if you want to start with questions to the Energy Bureau.
Thank you, Ms. Acaron. Yes, Margarita Mercado Chegaray for the record, and Mario Hurtado is prepared to show a brief presentation. He has access to the system. Yes.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mario Hurtado from Luma. I'm going to, I have 3 slides to inform the Commission about the status, current status of the work on the Vegetation Management Plan, and would ask to be able to present that and address any questions that you might have.
Yes, please go ahead.
Great, thank you. So the vegetation management is a very important area of regular maintenance of the electric transmission distribution system. Luma, from the beginning of doing the diligence on the opportunity to come and become the private operator in Puerto Rico, has been studying and looking carefully at the vegetation management issues, and have engaged, among other work, in preparing a vegetation management plan. And I will talk a little bit about the scope of that plan, the progress that's been done and the sort of perspective that we've taken on that, and then also just inform what our current work schedule is to deliver that plan. There we go. So in terms of the process and scope of this plan, we know that this is a subject that's received, a lot of attention from different stakeholders and from the Energy Bureau. We know that the plan has also, that the importance of vegetation management has been recognized in Act 57 and Act 17, and are taking that into account in the preparation of our vegetation management plan. Our vision is that we will be able to provide safe and effective management of the vegetation as it affects the transmission and distribution system, while maintaining a solid, harmonious relationship with adjoining land users, the environment, and affected stakeholders. What we plan to do is apply methods that are site sensitive, that have been thought of specifically for the situation here in Puerto Rico, that are based on best practices and scientific tree care research information available. In so doing, we look to make sure that we minimize the impact to sensitive wildlife and plants and cultural resources and all other natural resources as much as possible, while at the same time ensuring that we are executing safe and reliable operation of the electric system. We recognize that there is a balancing act in some cases that we have to do to achieve our primary mission of providing reliability for the electric system and making sure that we are keeping the lights on as much as possible. And at the same time, we have responsibilities that are critical in terms of minimizing impacts and being good stewards of the resources that we may impact, and of having proactive communication and effective dialogue with landowners who may be affected by the work in the right-of-way in order for us to provide electric service. So in terms of the process that we followed so far, very simply, we've divided up into 3 stages. Initially, we began with our process development, which was to outline and define the objectives of our plan. We have brought forward a team of industry-leading subject matter experts so that we could study the applicable laws, regulations, and industry standards, and also look at who are the primary key stakeholders that would be affected by the vegetation management plan and vegetation management activities. We've worked closely with PREPA and other stakeholders to review the work that's currently being done and has been done in recent years on vegetation management, the way it's been carried out, and the way that parts of that work have been contracted and executed. We've been able, in the next stage, as part of our gap analysis and data assessment, to review PREPA's data and information. We have executed a gap analysis between existing practices and industry-leading practices. We have brought to bear the experience we have from our parent companies in multiple jurisdictions in North America, and then thought carefully about how we can apply those practices to Puerto Rico. And we've looked at how similarly situated utilities in similar climates and with a similar type of vegetation, how they're able to manage their vegetation management tasks. So in part of looking at the existing practices, it's fairly broad. We look at management personnel, we've looked at contract oversight, what kind of equipment needs to be used, functions, processes, and procedures. So taking all of that into account, we've then engaged very actively in developing the vegetation management plan, going through a process of drafting, review, and then ultimately we expect to file that vegetation management plan with the Energy Bureau. On the next slide, this just outlines the current, in draft form, the major topics that we are looking to address in the vegetation management plan. All of these we think are quite important to a fulsome plan, and one that takes into account the multiple aspects of planning and execution of these tasks. Stakeholder management is quite important, and one of the things that I mentioned before, working with stakeholders, including landowners that could be affected. Obviously, applicable laws and regulations, policy, goals, and I won't go through each one of these. I will say that our approach is to take what in the industry is called an integrated vegetation management approach. So that's something that's very holistic and looks at not just, which is very critical, the maintenance of the initial clearing of the right-of-way to make sure that it's done within the industry standards, in order to assure that there's not interference on the lines and there's not physical contact with transmission and distribution lines, but also just a more full plan that takes into account what happens after that initial clearing, how that's maintained over time, what are the appropriate practices to do that depending on the conditions that exist and the kind of infrastructure that exists in place. So that's obviously part of the processes and maintenance practices that I mentioned. And then, we think it's quite important to be able to manage the performance of this program, to manage the performance of any contractors that we have involved. And then obviously, we have a series, we've looked carefully at the expenditures that would have to be made and the investments that have to be made in order to carry out the vegetation management. Vegetation management is one aspect of a full operation and maintenance practice, and so we look at it as it has to be integrated into the other activities that we're carrying out in order to improve the system. In terms of the current schedule, we, as part of our front-end transition, scheduled a series of activities with our teams to focus on delivery in the current time frame. In other words, very soon on those major deliverables that we have outlined in the operation and maintenance agreement. That includes our initial budgets, our system remediation plan, our system operations principles, and there's one that I'm missing right now off the top of my head. Oh, our performance metrics, excuse me. So our operating level plans, which are much more detailed at a much more detailed level, have generally been scheduled to be delivered after those plans. And so the current schedule that we have, and this is what we've been reporting on in our monthly reports as part of our front-end transition, is that we have, at this stage, we've already completed our draft plan. We have engaged at this stage in a working level review. We think that we will have that completed by the end of the current month. And then we will have a pretty comprehensive best practices review to integrate into the plan. In other words, really look at carefully and critically what is in the plan and does it really conform to best practices? And then what are the stages that we need to step through to get to those best practices in terms of time and resources? And then finally, we are looking to complete our final review and issue the vegetation management plan in March. And so that's the current schedule that we have.
Mr. Hurtado.
Yes, ma'am.
A clarifying question. The first step there on December 31st is year 2020, right? Instead of 2021.
Yes, correct. Thank you very much. That is a mistake. Yeah, we've already completed our draft plan, and that was completed last year.
Mr. Hurtado, this is Commissioner Rivera. I do have one question regarding this slide.
Yes,
can you confirm that having an approved vegetation management plan from the Energy Bureau is not a requirement, an approved plan is not a requirement for service commencement date?
Under the operation and maintenance contract, it is not a requirement now.
And what will be the requirement then? What will LUMA should have regarding this topic by the service commencement date?
By the service commencement date, we need to have delivered the plan and submitted it, but for information at that stage. So we will have completed the plan. We'll have a plan that we will be able to implement, and we will have delivered that plan in its final form, subject to anything that comes later, obviously time or other comments they get from important stakeholders, but we'll have delivered that plan to the Bureau.
So what I'm hearing is that you interpret a plan that is significantly complete as being delivered for evaluation and finalized from the LUMA point of view, perspective.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your question, Commissioner.
Okay, let me rephrase that. The language in the contract is not that it's being delivered for evaluation; it's that it's substantially complete, or something to that effect.
Yes, sir. And delivered. So, and I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So the question is, it's just that I want to clarify and reconcile what you're telling us today with the actual language on the contract. And so should we interpret that from the LUMA perspective, substantially complete, it's equal or could be interpreted as being completed by LUMA and submitted for evaluation by the Energy Bureau.
I think that that's correct, yes. And I would agree with that statement.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the commissioners to Mr. Hurtado or Luma?
This is Commissioner Mateo. I know that the word or the term substantially complete is used in the contract, but how comprehensive will be that quote unquote substantially complete plan? And I'm asking because there is a requirement by law that PREPA and now Luma, because you're stepping into PREPA's role for the TND, must get an approval of a comprehensive vegetation management program. So how do you align those two visions or those two requirements, the one in the contract and the one that is in the law? Because I saw in your slides that your plan is supposed to comply with the law.
Yes, if I'm understanding your question, how comprehensive will it be? It will fully cover the necessary subjects to fully carry out the vegetation management activities as the operator. So it will have all of those are the major topics that it'll cover. It'll cover those in the detail necessary in order for the team to be able to carry out everything and to demonstrate that we're in compliance with the law and with regulation.
So we can expect then to receive a work timeline as part of that plan on how you're going to execute the proposed plan.
Yes, I would think that that's part of it. Yes, a work timeline. You know, we have to take into account the resources that are going to be necessary and make sure that those, and we've been doing that work, that's included in our initial budgets. Specifically the program and how it fits into the system remediation plan, that has also been taken into account and will be included in the system remediation plan. And the work that's going to be done, you know, has an impact on other aspects that we'll be reporting to the Bureau. So we'll have, in my view, it will be comprehensive in terms of what needs to be covered in order to follow industry practice as a T&D utility and fully carry out the duties that we have to carry out as the operator of the system.
I have a last question, and when you mention industry practices, I wanted to make sure and ask you whether Luma is adapting any industry practices to the conditions in Puerto Rico, because we may have some, guidance in industry practices of how wide a right-of-way is and how frequent you should go and monitor it, or etc. But it may be that those industry practices are not necessarily tailored to Puerto Rico needs. So are you adapting and customizing those for Puerto Rico conditions?
Yes. I mean, the short answer is yes, Commissioner. I mean, we think it's very important, not just in this case, but critically important in this case to look at what is industry best practice. There's a lot of advances that have been made recently in terms of having a much more science-based approach to, I'll call it forest management, or just generally, there's a lot of advances there, and the utility industry has tried to incorporate that into how it manages vegetation. And I think there's been a lot of work with key stakeholders in terms of how those rights of way are maintained in a way that allows you to meet the goals from an electric utility reliability standpoint, but also allows you to meet other important objectives that have to do with maintaining the natural resource, for example, or the habitat that's there. And all of that has to be done specifically for Puerto Rico, right? Because that's, we will be operating in Puerto Rico. So it will be very specific to the situation here, and that's that's part of the work that we've been doing.
If you watch the hearing that we had with PREPA when they presented their draft plan, you would know that we asked PREPA to, in order to maximize the financial resources and the workforce, to use a sequencing of the vegetation management work in a manner that is the most cost-effective and efficient. So if you are, for example, establishing that you're gonna deal with the vegetation in a certain line this year, when are you gonna go there again in a way that you don't have to do all the work again because it has grown out of control again, or something similar. So I think that based on what we told PREPA, we are expecting that to be encompassed in your plan.
I understand, Commissioner. We will take that under advisement and make sure that it's included in the plan.
Are you using or proposing any, for example, the use of drones or any technology for monitoring of conditions as part of the maintenance to lower the cost of the workforce and everything associated to that monitoring?
There's several, I'd say, relatively new technologies that have been used throughout the industry, but specifically as it relates to vegetation management. The use of advanced geographic information systems is a really important tool, not just for vegetation management, but it's especially helpful in vegetation management. And there are some newer measures relating to application of artificial intelligence. And there are things there that's a lot newer and more kind of on the edge of current practice, but we would like to start incorporating some of that in a pilot program format because we think that it will help in terms of achieving some of the goals that you mentioned in terms of efficiency and sequencing, because having more data on the conditions and then the growth rates and all of that that's data that can be crunched from a data management standpoint and analyzed in different ways. So that is one of the things that we look forward to doing. The employment of GIS is quite important also. That has to go along with sort of solid planning, right, and actual execution. And we think that there's a key aspect to our program which will look at sort of very rapid focus on the most critical areas. That has to be consistent with those circuits that we see as being kind of the highest impact or that are closest to being the most impacted. And then there's another aspect which is kind of the more systemic program implementation to get to a stage that you can have regularly preventive vegetation management and it's less reactive. So we want to address both of those aspects in our plan.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from commissioners? If not, we would proceed now with questions from Luma directed to the commissioners in order to clarify any matters regarding the filing.
Yes, we have really not a ton of not many questions. I have one question in terms of the I think it's the principles that you seek alignment with that were referenced in the order, the most recent order. There's an area that talks about, I think it's number 3, impact to areas of significant issues. And I was wondering if it would be possible to get more information on what the commission is looking for in that specific principle.
I think that what we are referring with that principle is to how your plan will address those areas that are probably the hardest to handle for management of vegetation and that cause the most problems or could pose the highest risk to the reliability and functioning of the system. In Puerto Rico, we have different issues that could go from either access, difficult topography, and different characteristics that could make problematic to have a quick solution for problems, vegetation problems. So one of the things that we want to see is how your plan attack those.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that really is the only specific question that we had in terms of the resolution or the process as it stands right now.
Mario, this is Jorge Camacho, pre-consultant. Really quick, for the benefit of the commissioners in regards to the process, we see that you are contemplating to issue the final vegetation management plan someone into the future. It seems that it's been contemplated that you are going to be filing the SRP sooner than that. There's relation between the vegetation management and compliance with codes and standards, National Electrical Safety Code, clearances. So the SRP is expectation that the SRP is going to include an element of the vegetation management plan, but it will not be the final vegetation management plan. Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, the system remediation plan will address what's necessary. It will have a description of the specific vegetation management program in order to go from the current state to one in which there's compliance with current codes and standards. And that will include a general description of the program, what's encompassed in that program, what the resources are necessary to carry out that program, major milestones, timeline, and also how that program fits public policy objectives and other critical guidelines that have been provided that have already been provided in law or in regulation or other policy objectives that have been established. So that will be part of the system remediation plan. It will also include costs, and those costs will be included in the initial budgets. And we will be able to address questions as relate to those aspects within those two dockets.
And then for the benefit of the commissioners in regards to the material that for evaluation, have you done any kind to submit? Have you done in regards to the vegetation management targeting, any kind of quantification or reliability improvements, probably through the reliability indices in order to target the program more effectively that you may be planning on submitting to the PREP?
So the work that's included in vegetation management is part of the overall improvement programs, and it's one aspect of, it's going to affect several things, but if we just look specifically at reliability metrics, the number one cause in the data that we've looked at, I believe, of outages has, that has a specific description is vegetation, in terms of the data that's been collected. That's my recollection. And so as the vegetation management program proceeds, there's going to be an impact on reliability, and we've taken that into account in looking at the potential targets and the proposed targets for reliability indices. So yes, we will have incorporated that work into our plans and into the proposed metrics that we're going to propose, that we'll have.
Yeah, in regards to targeting and quantification of improvements, what I meant was, you are targeting areas that will yield the most improvement potential. Have you done that kind of analysis to turn into the PREP?
We have looked. I know that our teams have looked at prioritization and sequencing, and they've looked at the data that's available, and are still working, in fact, on that. And I don't know that I don't have a specific study in mind, but if there's something specific that that we'd like us to look at, we will go ahead and look at it. But in general, again, vegetation management, as with the other areas of operation and maintenance or of infrastructure rebuilding, we're taking an approach which is to prioritize those circuits that we think have the biggest impact. In terms of the system remediation plan, we also have to look at those that are the most critical. And so part of that estimation is which ones would have the biggest impact where there's a failure. So, that failure could include a vegetation contact or just a failure of the equipment generally. So we'll look at both of those and then, prioritize the ones that will have the biggest impact in terms of the indices that we're targeting. For example, reliability and other things. It's a multivariable analysis, and it involves a lot of judgment because the data is not perfect, and because you have to make decisions and trade-offs about which things you need to do in order. But our general approach is prioritize those circuits that have the biggest impact and will help the most to make the largest improvements in reliability and other aspects. Resiliency will also be improved significantly by having the vegetation management program carried out effectively, right? And those two things will go, in terms of vegetation management, they'll be closely linked. Okay,
great. So then your intention is to submit those numbers that support those improvements in resilience and reliability, because you have chunked the numbers to support the improvements, right?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Yeah, the numbers that you have used to identify those areas where sequencing will make sense in regards to prioritization, those numbers are available to be evaluated.
Yes, and we will include, we will provide backup for, based on our analysis and current data, how we plan currently to sequence the work and prioritize work in terms of construction, vegetation management, and other activities.
Thanks.
This is Commissioner Mateo. Mr. Hurtado, as in this plan, as with any other plan that LUMA will be submitting to the Bureau, we would expect to for you to include any report, copies of any reports, analysis, or studies you may have done, even if they are simple ones, as backup documentation for the plan, in order for the Bureau to understand your vision and why you decided to propose this content in the plan. So please include those as exhibits to your filing or appendixes to the plan, however you want to include them, but they should be part of the filing somehow.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Hurtado, any additional questions you may have?
No, we don't have any other questions at this time. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, commissioners, for your for listening to the presentation and for your questions.
Any other questions from commissioners?
No from my part at this time. Thanks.
Not for my part. Thank you.
All right,
No.
From me.
All right, thank you. So just as a housekeeping matter, I would request Attorney Mercado to file a copy of the presentation that was provided for us today in this the instant docket, so we can add it to the administrative file.
Noted, I will do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask PREPA if they have any questions or comments.
Not at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So that being said, we are going to end today's pre-filing technical conference at 10:45 in the morning of January 15, 2021. I want to thank everyone for their participation and have a great day.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day too.